The evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Miller's hardware store in the small town of Riverside, North Carolina. Captain Sarah Mitchell locked her car and adjusted the strap of her purse over her shoulder. She'd been home for only 2 days after completing a demanding 6-month deployment overseas, and she was still getting used to the quiet rhythm of civilian life. At 32 years old, Sarah had spent the last 10 years serving her country with distinction. She was a decorated Army officer, a helicopter pilot who had flown dozens of dangerous missions in combat zones. But here in Riverside, walking through the parking lot in jeans and a simple gray sweater, she looked like any other young woman running errands on a Thursday evening. She'd stopped at the hardware store to pick up supplies for her father's workshop. Her dad, retired Navy SEAL Commander James Mitchell, had practically raised her in that workshop after her mother passed away when Sarah was 12. Now, at 65, he spent his days building furniture and mentoring troubled kids at the local community center. Sarah had just placed her purchases in the trunk when she heard the rumble of motorcycles pulling into the parking lot. 3 bikes, 3 riders. They parked near the entrance, their engines deliberately loud in the quiet evening air. She didn't pay them much attention at first. She was thinking about dinner with her dad, about the normalcy she'd been craving for months. But as she walked back toward the store to grab one more item she'd forgotten, she noticed the 3 men were now standing by their bikes, watching her. "Well, well," one of them called out. He was tall and heavily built, with a thick beard and arms covered in faded tattoos. "What do we have here?" Sarah kept walking, her military training automatically kicking in. She was aware of them but showed no reaction. "Don't engage. Don't escalate." "Hey, I'm talking to you," the man said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. The second man, shorter but stockier, laughed. "Come on, Rick, leave the girl alone." But Rick wasn't interested in backing down. He started walking towards Sarah, his 2 companions following. "Just being friendly, that's all. No harm in being friendly, right?" Sarah stopped and turned to face them, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm just here to shop. Have a good evening." She tried to walk past them, but Rick stepped into her path. Up close, she could smell alcohol on his breath. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. "You're real pretty," he said. "Too pretty to be so unfriendly." "I need you to step aside," Sarah said calmly. Her heart was beating faster now, but her voice remained steady. She'd faced armed insurgents in combat zones. She wasn't going to show fear to 3 drunk men in a parking lot. The third man, younger than the other 2 with a thin face and nervous energy, circled around behind her. "We just want to talk. What's the hurry?" Sarah's mind raced through her options. The parking lot was mostly empty. The hardware store would close in 15 minutes. There were a few cars scattered around, but no people in sight. She could fight if she had to, her hand-to-hand combat training was extensive. But 3 against 1, especially when at least one of them was drunk and unpredictable, wasn't ideal odds. "Look," she said, keeping her voice level, "I don't want any trouble, just let me pass." Rick laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the brick wall of the store. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? We're just 3 guys trying to have a conversation with a beautiful woman. That's not trouble." "You're making her uncomfortable, Rick," the stocky one said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. "She'll be fine," Rick said, stepping closer. "Won't you, sweetheart?" Sarah took a step back and found herself against the wall of the building. The 3 men had effectively boxed her in, Rick in front, the other 2 on either side. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to think clearly. She could scream, she could run, she could fight. But first, she'd try one more time to de-escalate. "I'm asking you nicely one last time," she said. "Move aside and let me leave." Rick's expression hardened. "Or what? What are you going to do about it, little girl?" Little girl. Sarah had heard those words before, in different contexts, from male soldiers who didn't think women belonged in combat, from superior officers who doubted her abilities, from men who thought her rank and her accomplishments meant nothing because of her gender. She'd proven them all wrong, every single time. But right now, in this parking lot, with 3 men closing in and no witnesses in sight, proving anything wasn't her priority, getting out safely was. "I don't want to hurt you," Sarah said quietly. All 3 men laughed at that. "Hurt us?" Rick said. "Oh, that's Rich. You hear that, boys? She doesn't want to hurt us." The younger one moved closer, emboldened by Rick's mockery. "Maybe we should." Sarah's phone was in her back pocket. In one smooth motion, she pulled it out and held down the side button, activating the emergency call function. But before she could raise it to her ear, Rick grabbed her wrist. "Who are you calling?" he demanded. "Let go of me," Sarah said, her voice sharp now. Instead, Rick twisted her arm, trying to take the phone. Sarah reacted instinctively, using a defensive technique she'd practiced thousands of times. She pivoted, broke his grip, and created distance, but the movement brought her closer to the other 2 men. The stocky one grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. "Hey, take it easy," the younger one said, suddenly sounding uncertain. "Rick, maybe we should." "Shut up," Rick snarled. He was angry now, his pride wounded. He stepped toward Sarah again. Sarah struggled against the man holding her, but his grip was strong. Her phone had fallen to the ground. She could feel panic starting to creep in, and she fought it down. Panic was the enemy. Panic got you killed. But these weren't enemy combatants. These were American citizens, drunk and stupid and dangerous, but not soldiers. She couldn't treat this like a combat situation. There were laws, consequences. She had to be smart. "Let her go, man," the younger one said, his voice rising. "This is getting out of hand." "I said shut up," Rick shouted. And then Sarah did something she hadn't done since she was a little girl lost in a department store. Something she'd never done in combat, never done during any mission, no matter how dangerous. She called for her father. "Dad," she whispered, not to the men around her, but into the phone that lay on the ground, its screen still glowing. She didn't know if the call had connected. She didn't know if anyone could hear her, but she said it anyway, a reflex from childhood. "Dad, help me." Rick reached for her again, and Sarah made a decision. She drove her heel down hard on the stocky man's instep. He yelled and loosened his grip just enough. She twisted free, drove her elbow into his solar plexus, and when he doubled over, she spun toward Rick. But Rick was bigger and faster than she'd anticipated. He caught her arm and slammed her back against the wall. Pain shot through her shoulder. "You want to fight?" he growled. "Fine, let's fight." Sarah brought her knee up hard, aiming for his groin, but he blocked it with his thigh. The younger man grabbed her other arm. She was pinned again, this time against the brick wall, with Rick's face inches from hers. "Not so tough now, are you?" he said. Sarah looked him in the eye, refusing to show the fear that was threatening to overwhelm her. She'd survived combat zones. She'd survived helicopter crashes. She'd survived things these men couldn't imagine. But right now, in this moment, she was in real danger, and she knew it. "Please," she said, adding the word even as it left her mouth. "Please just let me go." Rick smiled, a cruel expression that made her stomach turn. And then from across the parking lot came a voice that changed everything. "Step away from my daughter." The voice was quiet, controlled, but it carried a weight that made all 3 men freeze. James Mitchell stood 30 feet away next to his old pickup truck. He must have arrived while Sarah was fighting. He wasn't a large man. At 65, he stood 5'10" and weighed maybe 170. But there was something in the way he held himself, something in his eyes that made dangerous men reconsider their choices. Sarah had seen that look before. It was the look of a man who had done things, seen things, survived things that most people couldn't comprehend. It was the look of a warrior who had nothing left to prove and nothing left to fear. Rick, drunk and stupid, and used to intimidating people, didn't recognize what he was seeing. "This doesn't concern you, old man," he said. "Walk away." James took 3 steps forward, just 3. But the way he moved, economical, balanced, purposeful, made the younger man release Sarah's arm and back up. "Last chance," James said. "Step away from her." The stocky man, still holding his stomach where Sarah had elbowed him, moved away from the wall. "Come on, Rick, let's just go." But Rick, pride and alcohol clouding his judgment, wasn't ready to back down. "Or what?" he challenged. James smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Son," he said, his voice still quiet, still controlled, "you have no idea who you're dealing with. That woman you're threatening. She's a decorated army captain who served 3 combat tours. She's flown rescue missions under fire. She's saved more lives than you've probably met in your entire existence." He took another step forward. "And she's my daughter." Rick finally let go of Sarah, but he didn't back away. "Yeah, and who are you? Her daddy come to rescue her." "I'm nobody," James said. "Just a concerned father, but I used to be a Navy SEAL, 25 years, and if you don't walk away right now, you're going to learn exactly what that means." The change in the 3 men was immediate. The younger one actually raised his hands in surrender. The stocky one turned toward his motorcycle. Even Rick, drunk as he was, seemed to recognize that he'd made a very serious mistake. "We didn't mean anything," the stocky one said quickly. "We were just—" "I know exactly what you were doing," James said. "Get on your bikes, leave, and pray I don't decide to follow you home and have a longer conversation about how to treat women." They went to their motorcycles. Rick moved slowly, trying to salvage some shred of dignity, but his hands were shaking as he started his engine. Within 30 seconds, all 3 bikes were pulling out of the parking lot, their engines fatting into the distance. James walked to Sarah and picked up her phone from the ground. He checked it, saw that the emergency call had connected but not gone through, and handed it to her. "You okay?" he asked. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice yet. "You did good," James said. "You kept your head, you tried to de-escalate, you defended yourself when you had to." "I called for you," Sarah said, and her voice cracked on the words. "I actually called for you like I was a kid again." James put his arm around her shoulders. "Sarah, I don't care if you're a 12-year-old girl or a decorated army captain. You're my daughter. You can always call for me." They stood there in the parking lot as the last light faded from the sky. Sarah leaned against her father, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving her shaky and exhausted. "How did you know I was here?" she asked. "You said you were stopping at the hardware store. When you didn't come home, I got worried." "Dad, I'm a grown woman, a soldier." "I know," James said, "but you're still my kid, and something told me to come check." Sarah pulled away and looked at him. A father's intuition. "Something like that," James said. He looked toward the road where the motorcycles had disappeared. "But I don't think this is over, Sarah. Men like that, they don't forget. They don't let it go. They'll be angry and embarrassed, and that makes them dangerous." "What do you think they'll do the next morning?" Sarah sat at her father's kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to make sense of what had happened. The bruises on her arms had darkened overnight, fingerprint-shaped marks where the men had grabbed her. She'd photographed them, just in case, though she wasn't sure what she'd do with the evidence. James came in from his morning run, still fit and disciplined despite his age. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Not really," Sarah admitted. He poured himself coffee and sat across from her. "We should file a police report." "And say what?" 3 men bothered me in a parking lot until my dad scared them off." "Sarah, they assaulted you." "I know," she said. "But you know how these things go, Dad. It becomes a he said, she said situation. And I'm only in town for another week before I have to report back to base." James frowned. "That's not good enough." "I'm not saying we do nothing," Sarah said. "I'm just saying we need to be smart about it. Let me think about our options. She spent the morning trying to focus on other things, helping her dad in his workshop, going for a run, cleaning her service pistol. But her mind kept returning to the parking lot, to the feeling of being trapped against that wall. At noon, her phone rang. Unknown number. Captain Mitchell, she answered. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice she recognized, Rick. You think you're so tough, he said. You and your daddy. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Small town, people talk. I know who you are now. Army captain, big deal. You're still just a woman who needed her daddy to save her. What do you want? Sarah asked, her voice cold. I want you to know that we're not done. You embarrassed me. Your old man threatened me. That's not something I forget. Is that a threat? Rick laughed. Just a friendly heads up. Watch your back, Captain. The line went dead. Sarah immediately called the Riverside Police Department and asked to speak with someone about filing a harassment report. 20 minutes later, she was sitting in the small police station, talking to Officer Danny Preston, a man in his early 40s with a friendly but tired face. I know Rick Thompson, Officer Preston said after Sarah finished her account. He's been trouble for years. Bar fights, drunk and disorderly, couple of assault charges that got dropped. His buddies are Pete Mason and Kyle Brennan. Same story, local troublemakers. So what can be done? Sarah asked. Preston sighed. I can document your report. I can go talk to them, warn them to stay away from you. But honestly, Captain Mitchell, unless they do something concrete, show up at your house, threaten you in front of witnesses, physically harm you, there's not much the law can do. They physically harmed me last night, Sarah said, showing him the bruises. Were there any witnesses besides your father? No. And you said your dad intervened before things escalated further. Yes. Preston nodded sympathetically. I understand your frustration, I really do. But from a legal standpoint, we've got a minor assault at best, with no independent witnesses. A good lawyer would tear it apart. Rick and his friends would claim it was all a misunderstanding, that they were just talking to you, that you overreacted. So I'm just supposed to wait until they do something worse. No, Preston said firmly. You're supposed to be careful. Don't go out alone, especially at night. Vary your routine. Keep your phone charged and on you at all times. And if they approach you again, call 911 immediately. Sarah felt the familiar frustration of being a woman in a system that often failed to protect women. She'd felt it before, in the military, when reporting harassment meant risking your career. She'd hoped civilian life would be different. I'll talk to them, Preston promised. I'll make it clear that we're watching them. Sometimes that's enough to make guys like this back off. Sarah thanked him and left the station, but she didn't feel reassured. That afternoon, she and James went to the community center where he volunteered. He taught woodworking to at-risk kids, most of them teenagers who'd gotten into minor trouble and needed positive role models. Mr. Mitchell, a tall 15-year-old named Marcus, called out when they arrived. You bringing your daughter by to show us up? James laughed. Marcus, meet Captain Sarah Mitchell. She could fly circles around both of us, literally. Sarah spent the next few hours in the workshop, helping the kids with their projects. It was peaceful, normal, exactly what she needed after the stress of the past 24 hours. But when evening came and they left the center, she noticed a familiar motorcycle parked across the street. Kyle Brennan, the younger one from the parking lot, sat on it, watching. Dad, Sarah said quietly. James had already seen him. Get in the truck. They drove home in silence, but Sarah kept checking the mirrors. The motorcycle followed them for 3 blocks before turning off. This is escalating, James said. I know. We need to do something. Like what? Officer Preston made it clear the law can't help unless they actually do something. James pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine. Sarah, I didn't spend 25 years protecting this country so my daughter could be terrorized in her own hometown. I'm not being terrorized, Sarah said, but even she didn't believe it. That night Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her childhood bedroom, listening to every sound. At 2 in the morning, she heard an engine outside. She got up and looked out the window. Rick's pickup truck was parked across the street, idling. She could see him in the driver's seat, just sitting there. Sarah grabbed her phone and called Officer Preston's direct number, which he'd given her. "They're outside my father's house," she said when he answered, "just sitting there." "I'm 5 minutes away," Preston said. But by the time he arrived, the truck was gone. "I saw it," Sarah insisted. "He was there." "I believe you," Preston said, "but he'll claim he was just driving by, that he has a right to use public streets. This is harassment." "I know, and I'm documenting every incident. But Sarah, you need to understand, guys like Rick, they're testing boundaries. They want to scare you, make you feel powerless. The best thing you can do is not let them see that it's working." After Preston left, Sarah found her father in the kitchen, cleaning his service pistol. "I haven't carried this in 15 years, James said, "but I still remember how." "Dad, we can't." "Can't what? Defend ourselves." "Sarah, these men are escalating. You know it, I know it. We need to be prepared." Sarah sat down across from him. "I've been in combat zones, I've been shot at. I've had rockets fired at my helicopter, but somehow this feels worse. Because over there the enemy was clear. The rules were clear. Here I'm supposed to just, what, wait, hope they get bored and move on." "No," James said. "We're going to be smart about this. Tomorrow, we're going to install security cameras around the house. We're going to document everything. And we're going to make sure you're never alone in a vulnerable situation." "I hate this," Sarah said. "I hate feeling like a victim." "You're not a victim," James said firmly. "You're a survivor, there's a difference." The next 2 days passed in a tense routine. Sarah and James installed cameras. They informed the neighbors about the situation. Officer Preston increased patrols in their neighborhood. But Rick and his friends were careful. They never did anything overtly illegal. They'd drive by the house slowly, making sure Sarah saw them. They'd show up at places Sarah went, the grocery store, the gas station, the coffee shop, but always maintaining just enough distance to claim coincidence. It was psychological warfare, and Sarah recognized it because she'd seen it before. Intimidation, wearing down the enemy's resolve without firing a shot. On the 4th day, Sarah received another phone call. "You can't hide behind Daddy forever," Rick said. "Eventually, you'll be alone, and when you are, we're going to have that conversation we started." "I've reported every threat," Sarah said. "The police know." "The police can't do anything," Rick interrupted. "I know my rights. I haven't done anything illegal. I'm just a concerned citizen who keeps running into the same woman around town." "What do you want from me?" "I want you to know what it feels like to be scared. Like I was scared when your daddy threatened me. Fair is fair, right?" Sarah ended the call and immediately forwarded the recording to Officer Preston. He called back within an hour. "I've got enough now to get a temporary restraining order. I'm heading over to serve it to him right now." But when Preston arrived at Rick's house, he found it empty. According to neighbors, Rick and his friends had left that morning, telling people they were heading to a motorcycle rally in Tennessee. "How convenient," Sarah said when Preston called with the update. "Look, this might actually be good news," Preston said. "Rally lasts a week. That gives us time to get the restraining order processed. When they get back, if they violate it, I can arrest them." Sarah wanted to feel relieved, but something felt off. "You really think they just left town?" "I'm checking with the rally organizers to confirm they're registered," Preston said. "But yeah, it looks like they're gone." That night, Sarah and James had dinner at Roberto's, the Italian restaurant where they'd celebrated every one of Sarah's birthdays since she was 13. It felt like the first normal evening they'd had since the incident in the parking lot. "Maybe Preston's right," James said over pasta. "Maybe they're backing off." "Maybe," Sarah said, though she wasn't convinced. They were finishing dessert when Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A photo. Sarah's stomach dropped as she opened it. It was a picture of her and James, taken from outside the restaurant, taken moments ago. The message below read, "Enjoy your dinner." Sarah showed James, who immediately stood and looked around the restaurant. Through the window, Sarah could see Kyle Brennan on his motorcycle, phone in hand, smiling. James started toward the door, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "No," she said. "That's what he wants. He wants you to come outside to do something that gives them ammunition." "Sarah." "Trust me, Dad. We call Preston, we document. We don't give them what they want." But as she watched Kyle drive away, Sarah made a decision. This couldn't continue. She was done being reactive. It was time to take control of the situation. After they got home, Sarah sat down at her laptop and began to research. Rick Thompson, Pete Mason, Kyle Brennan. She used her military intelligence training to dig into their backgrounds, their social media, their patterns. What she found was enlightening. Rick had 3 prior assault charges, all involving women, all dropped when the victim stopped cooperating. Pete had a DUI and a domestic violence complaint from an ex-girlfriend. Kyle was the least troublesome of the 3, but he'd been arrested twice for vandalism. More interesting was what she found on their social media. Photos from last night, not in Tennessee, but at a bar 20 miles outside Riverside. They'd lied about the rally. Sarah compiled everything into a detailed report and sent it to Officer Preston with a simple message. "They're not in Tennessee. They're escalating. We need to act before someone gets hurt." Preston called her within minutes. "I see it. I'm bringing them in for questioning tomorrow morning about violating the pre-restraining order contact. Can you and your father come to the station at 9 to make formal statements?" "We'll be there," Sarah said. But at 3 in the morning, Sarah woke to the sound of breaking glass. She was on her feet instantly, years of military training taking over. She grabbed her phone and moved to her bedroom door, listening. More breaking glass from downstairs. She opened her door quietly and saw her father in the hallway, pistol in hand. "Stay here," he whispered. "Not a chance," Sarah whispered back. They moved down the stairs together, James in front. The living room window had been smashed, and a brick lay on the floor surrounded by broken glass. Spray painted on the brick was a message, "Scared yet?" James moved to the window and looked out. "They're gone." Sarah was already on the phone with 911. Officer Preston arrived with 2 other officers. They secured the scene, photographed the evidence, and took statements. "This is it," Preston said. "This is criminal destruction of property plus the threatening message. Combined with the stalking behavior and the prior incidents, I can arrest them now." "Do it," James said. At 6 in the morning, Preston called back. "We've got Rick and Pete in custody. Kyle's in the wind. His girlfriend says she hasn't seen him since yesterday." "So 2 out of 3, Sarah said. "Better than none," Preston replied. "And Sarah, with what we've got now, the documented harassment, the threats, the property damage, the DA says she can probably make charges stick. Rick and Pete are looking at real jail time." It should have felt like a victory, but with Kyle still out there, Sarah couldn't relax. That afternoon, while James was giving his statement at the police station, Sarah went back to the house to board up the broken window. She was in the garage, gathering supplies, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Kyle Brennan standing in the garage doorway, blocking her exit. "Just you and me now," he said. "No daddy to save you this time." Sarah's heart raced, but her voice was steady. "The police are looking for you, Kyle. Turn yourself in before this gets worse." "Worse?" Kyle laughed. Rick and Pete are in jail because of you. My life is ruined because of you. How much worse can it get? He pulled a knife from his pocket. Sarah calculated her options. The garage had one exit through Kyle. Her phone was in her back pocket. Her father's workshop tools were within reach. You don't want to do this, Sarah said. Yeah, I do, Kyle said, moving closer. I really do. He lunged. Sarah grabbed a wooden handle from the workbench, a mallet James had been working on, and swung it hard. It connected with Kyle's wrist, sending the knife flying. He yelled in pain and surprise. Sarah didn't wait. She followed up with a strike to his solar plexus, exactly as she'd been trained. Kyle stumbled backward, gasping for air. She could have kept fighting. Part of her wanted to, but she was a soldier, not a vigilante. Instead, she pulled out her phone, took a photo of Kyle on the ground with the knife nearby, and called 911. This is Captain Sarah Mitchell, she said calmly. I have Kyle Brennan detained at my location. He attacked me with a knife. I've subdued him. Send officers immediately. Kyle tried to get up, but Sarah pointed the mallet at him. Stay down. I really don't want to hurt you more than I already have, but I will if you make me. He stayed down. Officer Preston arrived 7 minutes later with 3 other officers. They arrested Kyle, secured the knife as evidence, and took photos of the scene. You okay? Preston asked Sarah. I'm fine, she said. I've dealt with worse. Preston looked at Kyle being loaded into the patrol car, then back at Sarah. You know what? I believe you. The courtroom was smaller than Sarah expected. She'd testified in military tribunals before, but civilian court felt different, more intimate, more personal. She sat in the witness box, dressed in her Army service uniform, ribbons and medals displayed on her chest. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Huang, had suggested it. Let the jury see who you really are, Huang had said. Not just a victim, but a decorated soldier. Rick Thompson sat at the defense table, his lawyer beside him. Pete Mason and Kyle Brennan would be tried separately, but Rick was first. He'd been the ringleader, and his past record made him the strongest case. Rick looked different in a suit, his beard trimmed, his demeanor subdued. But when he looked at Sarah, she saw the same hostility, the same barely controlled anger. Captain Mitchell, Huang began, can you tell the jury what happened on the evening of November 14th in the parking lot of Miller's hardware store? Sarah took a breath and told the story. She kept her voice clear and factual, describing the events without embellishment. When she got to the part where she called for her father, several jurors leaned forward. Why did you call for your father? Huang asked. Because I was scared, Sarah said simply. I'm trained in combat. I've been in dangerous situations. But I was alone, outnumbered, and I knew these men didn't see me as a soldier or even as a person. They saw me as a target. Rick's lawyer, a man named Gerald Foster, stood for cross-examination. Captain Mitchell, you claim you were scared, but isn't it true that you're trained in hand-to-hand combat? Yes. And you did, in fact, physically strike my client and his associates. In self-defense, yes. But you struck first, didn't you? You elbowed Mr. Mason. You attempted to knee my client in the groin. After they grabbed me, Sarah interrupted. After they refused to let me leave. After they cornered me against a wall. Foster smiled slightly. Your father is a retired Navy SEAL, correct? Yes. A highly trained warrior. Would you say he's a dangerous man? Sarah understood where this was going. I'd say he's a capable man who knows how to handle threats. And when he arrived, he threatened my client, didn't he? Threatened to follow him home, to have a longer conversation about how to treat women. He told your client to leave me alone. By threatening violence, correct? Objection, Huang said. The witness's father is not on trial here. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Foster, please confine your questions to the defendant's actions. But Foster had made his point. He was painting Rick as the victim of two aggressive, trained fighters who'd overreacted to a friendly approach. It was a familiar story to Sarah. The woman who fought back became the aggressor. The men who started it became the victims. Over the next hour, Foster tried to poke holes in Sarah's testimony. He suggested she'd misinterpreted innocent flirting as a threat. He implied her military training made her paranoid and quick to violence. He even suggested that she'd orchestrated the whole thing to create drama. Sarah remained calm through all of it. She'd faced hostile interrogations before. She knew how to stick to the facts. When Foster finally sat down, Huang stood for redirect. "Captain Mitchell, the defense has suggested you overreacted to innocent behavior. Can you explain to the jury why you perceived the situation as threatening?" Sarah looked at the jury, 7 women, 5 men, ranging in age from 20s to 70s. "I've been trained to assess threats," she said. "In combat, you learn to read situations quickly because your life depends on it. When Mr. Thompson and his friends approached me, every indicator said I was in danger. They outnumbered me 3 to 1. They blocked my path. They ignored my repeated requests to leave me alone. They grabbed me physically. And when my father arrived, Mr. Thompson chose to escalate rather than de-escalate, even when confronted by someone who clearly had the skills to back up his warnings." She paused, making eye contact with each juror. "In my professional opinion, these men intended to harm me. Whether that harm was physical assault, sexual assault, or just psychological intimidation, I can't say. But they meant to hurt me in some way. And when they failed, they spent the next week proving me right through stalking, harassment, and ultimately property destruction, and attempted assault with a deadly weapon." The courtroom was silent. "No further questions," Huang said. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution brought in Officer Preston, who testified about Rick's history of assault charges. They showed the security footage from Sarah's house, the threatening text messages, photos of the broken window. James testified about what he'd seen in the parking lot, his calm demeanor and distinguished bearing lending credibility to his account. The defense tried to paint Rick as a troubled man with a drinking problem, not a dangerous criminal. They brought in his mother, who cried on the stand and talked about his difficult childhood. But when Kyle Brennan took the stand as part of a plea deal, everything changed. "Rick was angry after that night in the parking lot," Kyle testified. "He kept saying that the woman and her father had disrespected him, made him look weak in front of us. He said he was going to teach them a lesson." "What kind of lesson?" Huang asked. "He didn't say exactly, but he had us follow her around town, take pictures, send messages. Pete threw the brick through her window. I saw him do it. And Rick told me to wait until she was alone and scare her good." "And did you?" Kyle looked down. "I tried, but she fought back. She was a lot tougher than Rick thought." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the 4 women stood and read the verdict: guilty on all counts. Rick's face went pale. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but Rick shook it off. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Outside the courthouse, Sarah stood with her father and Officer Preston, watching the news crews pack up their equipment. The case had attracted regional attention, decorated female veteran terrorized by local men, and Sarah had given one brief statement to the press. "Justice was served today," she'd said. "I hope this case sends a message that harassment and intimidation will not be tolerated, regardless of the victim's gender or the perpetrator's excuses." "You did good in there," Preston said. "Really good." "I just told the truth," Sarah said. "That's all it should take," Preston replied. "But we both know it doesn't always work out that way. You got lucky with the jury." Sarah nodded. She knew he was right. If even 1 or 2 jurors had believed the defense's narrative, Rick might have walked. James put his arm around her shoulders. "Come on, let's go home." 2 weeks later, Sarah sat in the same courtroom for sentencing. Rick received 5 years for assault, stalking, and criminal threatening. Pete got 3 years. Kyle, who'd cooperated with prosecutors, received 2 years with the possibility of parole after one. It wasn't as much as Sarah had hoped for, but it was something. After the sentencing, Jennifer Huang found Sarah in the hallway. "I wanted you to know," she said. "Your testimony is already making a difference. I've had 3 women contact my office about cases they'd given up on. They saw your case in the news, and they're ready to come forward now." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. "Really? Really? What you did, standing up, fighting back, seeing it through, it matters. You showed other women that it's possible to get justice." Sarah thought about that as she drove back to her father's house. She'd been so focused on her own case, her own fear and anger, that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. That evening, she and James sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over the trees. "You head back to base tomorrow?" James asked. "Yeah. I've got to report for my new assignment." "What is it?" "Training position, teaching new pilots. It's a good posting, no deployments for at least 2 years." James smiled. "Good, you could use some quiet time." Sarah laughed. "I thought coming home for a week would be quiet time. Look how that turned out." "Life's funny that way," James said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I'm proud of you, not just for the military stuff, though that's impressive, but for how you handled this situation. You didn't let them make you a victim. You didn't let the system wear you down. You fought for justice the right way." "I learned from the best," Sarah said. They sat in comfortable silence, father and daughter, 2 warriors who'd both fought their battles and earned their peace. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer Huang. "One of the women who came forward has a strong case. We're moving forward with prosecution. Thank you for being brave." Sarah showed her father the message. "See," he said, "ripple effects. You never know how far one act of courage can spread." The next morning, Sarah packed her uniform and prepared to return to base. She was loading her car when a woman approached the house, middle-aged, nervous, clutching her purse. "Captain Mitchell," the woman said, "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Ellen Brennan, Kyle's mother." Sarah stiffened, but she stayed polite. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Brennan?" Ellen's eyes were red from crying. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what my son did, for what all of them did, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For not letting them get away with it. Kyle's been in trouble before, small stuff, but I always made excuses for him. Told myself he was just going through a phase, that he'd grow out of it. But after what he did to you, after hearing him testify about what Rick made him do," she paused, wiping her eyes. "He needed this. He needed to face real consequences. Maybe now he'll change." Sarah didn't know what to say. Part of her was still angry at Kyle, still remembered the fear she'd felt when he came at her with that knife. But she also saw the pain in his mother's face, the hope that her son might still turn his life around. "I hope you're right," Sarah said finally. "I hope he gets help in prison. I hope he comes out better than he went in." Ellen nodded. "Thank you for not hating him, for not hating all of us." After she left, James came out of the house. "That took guts," he said, "coming here to apologize." "Yeah," Sarah agreed. "Takes all kinds of courage, I guess. Not just the kind we learned in the military." She finished loading the car and hugged her father goodbye. "You call me when you get to base," James said. "I will. And Sarah, if you ever need me for any reason, you call. Doesn't matter if you're a soldier, a captain, or whatever rank you make it to. You're still my daughter. You can always call for me." Sarah smiled, remembering that whispered plea in the parking lot. "I know, Dad, I know." She drove out of Riverside as the morning sun climbed higher, heading back to base, back to her duties, back to the life she'd built through determination and skill. But she carried something new with her now. The knowledge that standing up to injustice, even when it was hard, even when the system seemed stacked against you, could make a real difference. 3 months later, Sarah received a letter from Jennifer Huang. Rick Thompson had been denied early parole. Pete Mason had been required to attend anger management counseling as part of his sentence. And Kyle Brennan had enrolled in a GED program in prison, taking the first steps toward a different life. But the real news was in the second paragraph. The 3 women who came forward after your case have all seen their attackers convicted. Additionally, we've seen a 40% increase in harassment and assault reports in our county. Women are feeling empowered to come forward. You started something important, Captain Mitchell. Sarah folded the letter and put it in her desk drawer, next to her medals and commendations. She'd served her country in combat zones, flown dangerous missions, saved lives under fire. But somehow, standing up to 3 men in a parking lot and seeing justice through to the end felt like one of her most important victories. Because courage wasn't just about facing enemy fire. It was about facing injustice wherever it appeared, even in a small-town parking lot, even when the odds seemed impossible. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was whisper for help when you needed it, knowing that the right people would answer. Sarah's phone rang, her father's number. "Hey, Dad," she answered. "Just checking in," James said, "making sure you're doing okay." "I'm good," Sarah said, and for the first time in months she really meant it. "Good, because I'm teaching a self-defense class at the community center next month. For women. I was hoping you might come help out, talk about your experience." Sarah thought about Ellen Brennan's tears, about the women who'd found courage to come forward, about the ripple effects of one act of standing up. "I'd be honored," she said. "That's my girl," James said. "I'll see you next month then." After they hung up, Sarah looked out her office window at the base, at the helicopters lined up on the tarmac, at the men and women in uniform going about their duties. She'd fought for her country, she'd fought for justice, she'd fought for herself. And she'd won. Not because she was the strongest or the toughest, but because she'd refused to give up. Because she'd called for help when she needed it. Because she'd trusted the system even when it seemed slow and inadequate. Because she'd been brave enough to stand up, speak out, and see it through. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah sat at her desk and began writing a letter to the next group of women who'd be attending her father's self-defense class. "Dear friends," she wrote, "let me tell you about courage and about the night I whispered for help and about what happened when I decided to fight back.